She blew bubbles to comfort a crying child, unaware her billionaire father was watching. What happened next? It changed 3 lives forever. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday morning. The sky was painted in soft shades of gray, the kind of morning that didn't promise anything special. The city was waking up slowly, and so was Clara, a single mom in her early 30s, whose life had been a never-ending storm of responsibilities, sacrifices, and silent strength. Clara had been awake since 5 a.m., making toast and eggs for her 7-year-old son, Jamie. She kissed his forehead as he climbed onto the school bus, his small backpack bouncing with every step. Then she grabbed her own lunch, packed in a reused grocery bag, and headed out for work. Clara wasn't headed to an office. She wasn't wearing heels or carrying a laptop. Instead, she wore her usual faded blue janitor's uniform and heavy-soled sneakers. Her hands were callous from scrubbing floors. Her back ached from lifting bins and supplies day after day. But her heart? Still warm. She had just clocked in for her morning shift at one of the city's most prestigious private schools. A place where children arrived in luxury cars, nannies waited at the gate, and the hallways smelled of fresh paint and polished floors. Clara wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. She had learned to blend into the background. People rarely noticed her, except when they slipped on something or needed a spill cleaned up. She kept her head down and her work consistent. But that morning, something was different. As she pushed her cleaning cart down the brightly lit hallway, mop in one hand and spray bottle in the other, she passed by a group of children laughing, running toward the playground. It was a sound she loved, one of the few joys of working in a school. The innocence, the energy, the small reminders that joy still existed. Then she saw her. In the corner of the vast, manicured playground, far from the giggles and games, sat a little girl. Her small body was curled inward, as if trying to disappear into herself. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs, her face buried in her hands. Clara stopped mid-step. She stared for a second, unsure whether to step in. After all, she wasn't a teacher. She wasn't a counselor. Technically, this wasn't her job. But something about the girl's posture, her quiet pain, stirred something deep in Clara's chest. She knew that feeling. It was the same helpless sadness she saw in her son when he asked why Daddy wasn't coming back. The same tears she wiped away when Jamie had nightmares, or when she couldn't afford the toy he wanted. Clara had carried heartbreak on her back for years, but seeing it in the eyes of a child? That was something she couldn't walk away from. Clara glanced around. No teachers nearby. No one noticing the girl. She hesitated for only a moment, then gently steered her cart toward the bench. The little girl didn't look up as Clara approached. Clara crouched beside her, careful not to startle her. "Hey there, sweetheart," she said softly, her voice warm and soothing. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't answer. Her sobs slowed, but she kept her head down. Clara waited, letting the silence stretch. She had learned that sometimes, silence speaks louder than words. After a moment, she sat down on the edge of the bench, just close enough to offer comfort, not pressure. She looked around in her cart, digging past a rag and a bottle of bleach. Then she found it, a tiny, well-used bottle of bubble soap. She kept it with her always, a simple tool she used to cheer Jamie up when words didn't help. Clara unscrewed the cap and dipped the plastic wand in the liquid. Without saying a word, she lifted it gently to her lips and blew. Dozens of shimmering bubbles floated into the air, catching sunlight as they danced toward the sky. Some popped instantly. Others drifted slowly, as if reluctant to leave. The girl finally looked up. Her red, puffy eyes widened slightly as a bubble landed on her arm and burst silently. Clara smiled and blew another stream, this time aiming a few directly in front of her. The girl reached out slowly, trying to catch one. "I used to blow bubbles with my mom," she said softly, her voice shaky. Clara turned to her gently. "She must have loved you a lot." "She died last year," the girl whispered. "Now I don't like coming to school. Everyone acts like I'm normal, but I'm not." Clara's heart cracked open. She didn't give advice. She didn't pretend to fix it. Instead, she nodded. "I know that kind of pain," she said. "My little boy misses his dad too. But you know what helps sometimes? Making someone else smile." The girl sniffled. "Like you just did for me?" Clara chuckled. "Exactly. The girl took the bubble wand from her hand and blew a soft stream. Her tears hadn't completely dried, but for the first time she smiled. And as they sat there, blowing bubbles side by side, neither of them noticed the tall man standing at the second-floor window watching. Clara gently approached the crying little girl, careful not to move too quickly or startle her. Her footsteps slowed as she got closer, and she knelt down beside the bench where the girl sat, her small frame trembling with each sob. Clara's voice was soft and kind, like a warm blanket on a cold day. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" she asked gently, her eyes filled with empathy. The girl couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, all pigtails, pink sneakers, and a heart too small to carry the grief she clearly held. She didn't speak. She didn't even look up. She just shook her head slowly, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her fancy school cardigan. Clara didn't push. Years of being a mom had taught her that sometimes silence needed to be honored, and sometimes the best way to help someone was simply to be near. She looked at the girl for a moment, her own heart aching. Then, instinctively, she reached for something in her cart. Not her mop. Not the disinfectant. A small scratched-up plastic bottle. Bubble soap. It had become her secret weapon in moments like this. Not for spills but for sadness. Her son Jamie had always calmed down the moment she blew bubbles for him, as if those floating little orbs carried his worries away with them. And Clara, well, she had come to believe they carried a kind of quiet magic. She uncapped the bottle, dipped in the wand, and lifted it to her lips. With one slow breath she blew. A stream of bubbles floated out in front of them. They shimmered in the morning light, catching the sun's golden glow and breaking it into fragments of color. Tiny rainbows swirling in the air. Some drifted upward, toward the school windows above. Others wobbled in the breeze before landing gently on the bench, popping softly against the wood. Still the girl said nothing. But Clara noticed her breathing had slowed. Her sobs were quieter now. Her head lifted just a little. Clara dipped the wand again. This time she blew a cluster of bubbles, letting them swirl above the girl's head like a crown. And then slowly the girl looked up. Her cheeks were blotchy from crying, and her eyes were rimmed with red. But there, just beneath the sadness, was something else: curiosity, wonder, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. The girl's voice was barely above a whisper. "I used to blow these with my mom." Clara paused. She turned slightly to face her, her expression softening even more. "She sounds like someone really special," Clara said. The girl nodded slowly, eyes fixed on a bubble that had landed on her sleeve. "She was. We'd sit on the porch every Sunday and blow bubbles. She always said they were like little bits of joy floating away." Clara smiled. "That's a beautiful way to think of them." There was a long pause. "She died last year," the girl said, her voice cracking. Clara didn't speak right away. Her chest tightened with compassion. She remembered the pain in her son's voice the first time he said, "I miss Daddy." It was the same pain now flickering in this little girl's eyes. "I'm so sorry," Clara said gently. "That's a lot for a little heart to carry." The girl wiped her cheek with her sleeve again and looked down. Clara glanced at the bubble wand and held it out. "You know," she said, "you can still blow them. I think she'd want you to smile again." The girl hesitated, then reached out with a small hand and took the wand. Clara dipped it in the bubble mix for her. The girl raised it to her lips and blew, a little too hard the first time, sending a lopsided bubble flopping into the grass. Clara chuckled, but not in a mocking way. "Try again. Slower this time." The girl tried again. This time the bubbles formed perfectly, a small trail of glowing spheres dancing into the sky. She giggled, a real honest giggle, for the first time in who knows how long. Clara watched her, her heart swelling. She remembered Jamie's laugh, how one good giggle could pull him out of the darkest mood. She saw the same shift happening now in this girl. The power of a simple moment, a gentle distraction, a shared silence. "My name's Lily," the girl said suddenly, turning toward Clara. Clara smiled. "That's a beautiful name." "I'm Clara." Lily offered the wand back, but Clara shook her head. "Keep it. I think you'll need it more than I will today." Lily grinned and hugged the bubble bottle to her chest like a treasure. Clara stood up slowly, brushing off her knees. "I should probably get back to cleaning," she said with a wink. "You keep making magic." Lily nodded, eyes brighter now. "Thank you, Clara." As Clara turned to walk back to her cart, she didn't see what was happening above them. Behind one of the tall windows of the administrative office building, a man stood watching, still as a statue, eyes locked on the scene below. He had seen the whole thing, from the moment Clara knelt down to the moment Lily smiled. His jaw clenched, his heart pounding. That man was Victor Reynolds, one of the richest men in the country, a tech billionaire, a widower, and Lily's father. He had just witnessed a stranger give his daughter something no amount of money had been able to offer in months: comfort. And everything was about to change. What Clara didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly known, was that someone had been watching the entire scene unfold. From a large glass window on the second floor of the school's administrative building, a man stood still, his broad shoulders tense, his expression unreadable. He was tall, dressed in a dark, tailored suit that cost more than Clara probably made in a month. His tie was loose, his jaw clenched, and behind those sharp, calculating eyes was something unexpected: pain. His name was Victor Reynolds. To most of the world, that name meant wealth, power, innovation. The media called him a tech genius, the man who had built an empire from scratch, a software company that now touched every corner of modern life. Forbes listed him among the top 50 richest men in America. Investors hung on his every word. Business schools taught case studies on his strategies. But none of that mattered in this moment. Because right now, Victor wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a CEO or a trendsetter. He was just a father. And a heartbroken one at that. Earlier that morning, he had been in a boardroom preparing for a quarterly investor call when his phone buzzed. A message from the school. Lily had an emotional breakdown during recess. "Can you come immediately?" Victor had rushed out without a word. His driver had the car waiting downstairs. But even in the back of a luxury SUV with tinted windows, Victor's mind raced. Lily, his daughter, his only child. She was the last piece he had of his late wife, Margaret. It had been just over a year since cancer took Margaret from them, suddenly, cruelly. And though Victor had tried everything: therapy, art classes, even a golden retriever puppy, nothing had truly brought Lily back to life. She walked through her days like a shadow of herself, quiet, withdrawn, haunted by grief no child should have to carry. And now here she was crying on a bench, alone, until Clara came. Victor had just arrived at the school when he was led to the observation window by Lily's teacher. "She's outside," the teacher said. "We haven't approached her yet. She doesn't always respond well when she's upset. But one of the custodians is with her. She seems to be helping." Victor raised an eyebrow. A custodian? But when he looked out the window, he stopped breathing. He saw Lily curled on the bench, sobbing. And beside her was a woman in a blue janitor's uniform, kneeling down with gentle patience. She said something to Lily. He couldn't hear it, but it didn't matter. The warmth in her posture, the calm in her eyes, it was unmistakable. And then came the bubbles. Victor's eyes narrowed in confusion at first. The woman, Clara, had taken out a small plastic bottle from her cleaning cart. It looked cheap, something from a dollar store. But when she dipped the wand in and began blowing, something incredible happened. Dozens of tiny, glimmering bubbles floated into the sky, catching the sunlight in their soapy skins. They danced, sparkled, and twirled in the breeze. And then Lily lifted her head. Victor pressed a hand to the glass. He hadn't seen that look in months: wonder. That curious little light that used to live in Lily's eyes before their world shattered. A small smile appeared on her face. A real one. Victor stood frozen, overcome with emotion. How could a stranger do in 5 minutes what he, with all his money and resources, hadn't been able to do in over a year? He had hired therapists, specialists, grief counselors. He had taken Lily on expensive vacations to try and distract her. He had even considered moving to a new city just to start fresh. But nothing worked. She was still sad, still quiet, still lost. But now she was laughing, giggling even, as she reached out to catch the bubbles and blew her own into the air. Something inside Victor cracked open. Bubbles. Just bubbles. Not a strategy. Not a product. Not a 7-figure solution. Just a woman who took the time to kneel down and care. Victor watched as Clara gently spoke to Lily, then handed her the bubble wand. She didn't try to fix her. She didn't talk down to her. She just sat beside her as if to say, "You're not alone. It's okay to hurt." And Lily responded. Victor swallowed hard. The lump in his throat was almost too much. He leaned his head against the glass for a moment, eyes misty. He thought of Margaret. How she used to sit with Lily on their patio, blowing bubbles for hours. "Their happiness you can touch," she used to say. That was the kind of magic she believed in. And now, in the middle of a cold, chaotic world, that same magic had found its way back to their daughter. Through a janitor. Victor stepped back from the window, ran a hand through his hair, and made a decision. He needed to meet this woman. Who was she? Why did she carry bubble soap in her cleaning cart? And most importantly, how had she reached his daughter's heart when no one else could? Victor didn't have the answers. But what he did have for the first time in a very long time was hope. And that was priceless. After a few quiet moments, the magic in the air still gently lingering, Clara gave Lily one last reassuring smile and began to step back toward her cleaning cart. She didn't expect anything more from the encounter. For Clara, it had simply been about doing the right thing, comforting a child in distress. It didn't matter that it wasn't part of her job. It didn't matter that no one was watching. But someone had been watching. Footsteps approached from behind. "Excuse me," came a deep voice, calm but laced with emotion. Clara turned quickly, startled. She stood up straight, instinctively wiping her hands on her uniform and adjusting the loose hair that had slipped out of her ponytail. A man in a crisp navy suit stood before her, tall and composed, but his eyes looked tired, raw, and somehow familiar. "I'm sorry," Clara began, apologizing reflexively. "I didn't mean to overstep." She just looked upset and the man raised a hand gently. "No, please, don't apologize. You did more for her today than I've been able to in over a year." That's when Lily, who had been watching them both quietly, ran over and hugged the man around his waist. "She made the sadness go away, Daddy," she whispered, still clutching the little bubble wand tightly in her hand. Clara's eyes widened slightly. "Daddy?" So this was Lily's father, the one the school staff had spoken about in hushed tones. The tech mogul. The billionaire. Victor Reynolds. Clara suddenly felt very aware of her uniform, of the scuffed toes of her work shoes, and the lingering smell of bleach on her gloves. But Victor didn't seem to notice or care. He crouched down to hug Lily, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then he stood and turned to Clara again, a softness in his expression that surprised her. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "From the bottom of my heart. I watched the whole thing from the window. What you did for her. I've never seen anything like it." Clara offered a modest smile. She just needed someone to sit with her. And maybe a few bubbles. Victor chuckled softly, the sound edged with amazement. "Apparently, I've been overlooking the real tools of healing." He paused, as if deciding something in that very moment. "I'd really like to buy you a coffee sometime, just to say thank you. And," he hesitated, "I'd love to hear your story." Clara blinked, unsure what to say. Her first instinct was to politely decline. Why would someone like him want to talk to someone like her? But something in his eyes, something human, fatherly, broken, made her nod. "Sure," she said quietly. "Okay." The next day, Clara sat nervously in a small corner cafe just a block from the school, nursing a warm cup of tea. She had chosen her nicest blouse, an old favorite she had kept tucked in the back of her closet. Her palms were damp, and she kept glancing at the door. Then he walked in. Victor was dressed more casually today, still neat, still unmistakably refined, but less corporate, more approachable. He spotted her right away and smiled. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sitting down. "Thanks for the coffee," she replied. Gesturing toward the fresh cup he slid across the table to her. There was a short silence, the kind that settles in when two very different worlds meet unexpectedly. But then Victor asked, "So, Clara, tell me about you. How did you end up at St. Martin's?" Clara hesitated, then decided to speak honestly. "I used to be a preschool teacher," she began. "Loved it. It was the only thing I ever wanted to do, really work with kids. Help them feel seen. Help them feel But when my husband left, it got hard. I couldn't afford the rent anymore. I had a 3-year-old, no savings and no backup. She shrugged, her voice steady but low. I took whatever work I could. Cleaning jobs, night shifts, you name it. Ended up here at the school. It was supposed to be temporary, but, well, life doesn't always go according to plan. Victor listened quietly, nodding. He could tell she wasn't telling the story for sympathy. She was just telling the truth. And the bubbles? He asked. Clara smiled, her eyes softening. My son, Jamie. He's 6 now. Sensitive heart, like Lily. When he was younger, he had these night terrors. I didn't have money for fancy toys or therapy, but I remembered how much he loved bubbles at daycare. So I started blowing bubbles whenever he got scared. It distracted him, made him laugh. He said they made his bad feelings float away. Victor smiled. That's beautiful. Clara looked down at her tea. It gave me an idea actually once a long time ago. I wanted to open a community space. A kind of children's center where kids could process big feelings through play, art, creativity. Especially the ones who don't have access to therapy. But dreams don't pay the bills. Victor was quiet. Then he leaned forward, his eyes thoughtful. I think you're wrong about that, he said gently. Clara looked up, puzzled. Some dreams, he continued, just need the right person to believe in them. She stared at him, unsure what to say. Victor smiled. And I think I just met someone with a dream worth believing in. Exactly 1 week after that unexpected coffee conversation, Clara arrived home after a long evening shift. Her son Jamie was already asleep, curled up in his tiny bed with his favorite stuffed bear tucked under one arm. The apartment was quiet, dimly lit, with the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Clara tossed her worn-out bag onto the couch and let out a deep sigh. Another day, another set of floors scrubbed. Despite the fatigue, her thoughts kept drifting back to that afternoon with Victor, not because he was wealthy or well-known, but because he had genuinely listened. Not out of pity but with purpose. Still, she hadn't expected to hear from him again. People like him lived in a different world. One where meetings, mergers, and million-dollar deals took priority over the quiet dreams of a janitor. But then she saw it. An envelope on the kitchen table. It had no return address, just her name, written in elegant handwriting. Curious, Clara opened it, and immediately dropped into the nearest chair as her eyes scanned the contents. It wasn't just a thank you card. Inside was a letter, and it changed everything.
Understand
Dear Clara, it began. I've spent the past week thinking about how sometimes the smallest moments, the ones that seem insignificant at the time, are the ones that change everything. You brought joy to my daughter on a day when she was drowning in grief. You gave her a smile I feared I'd never see again. And more than that, you reminded me of what really matters. You once said dreams don't pay the bills. But some dreams are too important to ignore. So I hope you'll allow me to be part of yours. Clara blinked, stunned, as she unfolded the next page. A full scholarship for Jamie to attend St. Martin's, the same elite school where Lily studied. Tuition, books, uniforms, even transportation, all covered. Her heart raced. Then she noticed another document. A formal job offer. Victor had created a new role at the school. Director of Emotional Wellness and Creative Support. And he wanted Clara to fill it. The job description included developing programs using play therapy, art, and emotional support tools. The exact things she had once dreamed of building in her community center. And finally, at the very bottom of the stack was a certified letter confirming the unbelievable. A $50,000 grant. In her name. Specifically earmarked to help Clara open her Dream Children's Center. Fully funded with no strings attached. Clara's hand trembled as she read the last line of Victor's handwritten note. Sometimes healing doesn't come from money or power. It comes from someone who cares enough to blow bubbles. With gratitude, Victor Reynolds. Clara's vision blurred with tears. She pressed the letter to her chest, overwhelmed by emotion. She thought of all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep wondering if her life would ever change. The mornings she'd skipped breakfast so Jamie could eat. The endless shifts, the exhaustion. The buried dream of helping children through play and kindness. Now, it was happening. The next morning, Clara dropped Jamie off at school. His new school. He wore his neatly pressed uniform with wide-eyed excitement, holding tightly to his backpack. As they stood at the gates of St. Martin's, Clara couldn't stop smiling. "Do you think there'll be bubbles here too?" Jamie asked playfully. Clara laughed through her tears. "Oh honey, I think there'll be a lot more than bubbles." Inside the school building, Victor was waiting, not as a billionaire tech mogul, but simply as Lily's dad, and someone whose life had also been changed by an act of compassion. He greeted Clara with a warm handshake, and Lily appeared moments later, running up to Jamie with a grin. "Want to play at recess?" she asked. Jamie nodded. "Only if we can blow bubbles." The two kids ran off, giggling, their pain momentarily forgotten, not erased but healing one joyful step at a time. Victor turned to Clara. "So, ready to start building that dream?" Clara smiled, a new light in her eyes. "I've been ready for years. I just didn't know anyone would believe in it." "Well," Victor said with a nod, "now you do." A few months later, the Clara Hope Children's Center opened in a converted church space downtown. Filled with colorful murals, art stations, therapy toys, musical instruments, and of course bubble machines, it quickly became a safe haven for children from all backgrounds. Many came from difficult homes, many struggling silently, but here they found laughter, healing, and a space where their feelings mattered. And at the center of it all was Clara, no longer just a janitor, no longer invisible, but a woman whose compassion had started a ripple effect across an entire community. Victor became a quiet benefactor, helping expand the center over time. But he never tried to take over. He knew this was Clara's mission, and that his role was simply to support it. One simple act of kindness. One bottle of bubble soap. One woman who stopped, who cared, who didn't walk past a crying child. That's all it took. Because sometimes the biggest changes in life begin with the smallest gesture. And in this case, it all began with bubbles. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more real-life stories that prove kindness can change everything. Your support helps us keep sharing the stories the world needs to hear. Thanks for watching, and remember, even the smallest act of kindness can create a ripple of change. **